You know, have you ever wondered if there's more to ancient texts than just the words on the page? What if numbers themselves hold some kind of secret? Well, today we're going to dive into a theory that claims exactly that.
All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to start with a number. And at first glance, 1729, it probably looks totally random, right? But believe it or not, this specific number has been a source of fascination for mathematicians for over 100 years.
So, this is the famous Hardy-Ramanujan number. It's really a beautiful little piece of mathematical trivia. Here's why. It's the smallest number you can get by adding two cubed numbers together in two different ways. You can do 1 cubed plus 12 cubed, or you can do 9 cubed plus 10 cubed. Both paths lead you right to 1729. It's just a neat little mathematical curiosity.
But okay, here's where things get really wild. What is a famous math puzzle doing in a discussion about the Quran? Well, there's a modern theory, and its supporters claim that this exact number, 1729, is actually a key to unlocking a hidden mathematical code woven into Islam's holy book.
So let's get right into it. The idea is called the Mathani theory, and it basically proposes that the Quran isn't just a text, but that it's also built on a deliberate and incredibly complex numerical structure.
Think of it like this. The theory is kind of like a treasure map for the Quran. The idea is that all the numbers you see, chapter numbers, verse counts, even the number of letters, they aren't just random. They're supposedly placed there on purpose to point to this hidden divine harmony.
Okay, so how does this whole thing work? Let's break it down. The entire theory is built around three really important numbers. You can think of them as the keys to the code, the foundational players in this whole system.
And here's what's so cool about it. These three numbers aren't just separate. They're deeply interconnected. You've got 7, which is like the spiritual base. Then there's 19, seen as a kind of divine protector or a structural key. And then 1729. It's the mathematical bridge that actually links the other two together, both through its factors and even the sum of its digits. It's a neat little package.
So, the big question is, how do people who believe in this theory actually find these patterns? Well, it all comes down to a series of specific mathematical steps, which they call numerological transformations.
Basically, the theory uses a few core methods. You take a number from the Quran's text, say a verse count or a chapter number, and then you apply one of these transformations to it. The goal is to see if you can make it land on one of those three key numbers, 7, 19, or 1729.
Okay, let's walk through a pretty straightforward example so you can see what I mean. If you take the first 3 chapters of the Quran, the first 3 surahs, each one has a certain number of verses. So let's take those numbers.
And here you see the digit sum method in action. You add up those verse counts, and you get 493. Now you take the digits of that number, 4 plus 9 plus 3, which gets you 16. You're not done yet. You do it again, 1 plus 6, and bam, you land right on 7, one of the theory's core numbers.
But you know, the math isn't always that neat and tidy. And this is where the theory gets a little more abstract. It's a method they call a leap transformation.
So let's see how one of these leaps actually works. The theory might start with a calculation, something like what you see here. 2 squared plus 3 squared, which adds up to 13. Okay, now here's the twist. Instead of doing anything with the answer 13, the theory allows you to leap from addition over to multiplication. So you take the original components, the 4 and the 9, and you multiply them instead. That gives you 36. Now from here, proponents would use other steps to try and connect 36 back to a key number like 7, and honestly, it's this kind of flexibility that becomes a huge sticking point for critics. So what's the grand takeaway here? What's the ultimate claim? Well, proponents argue that all of these interlocking patterns, especially the way they seem to all point to one specific number, simply can't be a coincidence. To them, it's a deliberate, divine signature.
And this right here is really the climax of the whole theory. Proponents point to all these different starting points. I mean, things that seem totally unrelated, like chapter numbers, or even core spiritual ideas, like the 99 names of God. And they claim that when you apply their methods, they all converge.
They all lead to one single number, and that number is 1729. They even have a name for it, Paula 1729. Paula stands for Patterns over Linear Assumptions, which is just a fancy way of saying they believe this is a design that goes way beyond simple random chance.
Okay, but as you can probably guess, a theory this bold and, well, this unusual doesn't come without some serious pushback. There's a lot of criticism and debate, so let's flip the coin and look at the other side of the argument.
So on one side, you have the supporters. For them, this is nothing short of miraculous. They see it as solid evidence of divine authorship and even proof that the Quran has been perfectly preserved down to the letter for centuries.
But on the other side, you have the critics, and this includes a lot of mainstream Islamic scholars. They see this whole thing as a major distraction. They basically say, this is just numerology, it's not Islam. They argue it's like seeing shapes in the clouds, and it pulls focus away from the Quran's real message, which is about spirituality and how to live a good life. So the whole debate really boils down to this. The believers see a divine design that's just too complex to be an accident. But the critics fire back and say, look, you're cherry-picking the data. You know, why these specific chapters and not others? They point out that the math seems way too flexible. These leaps and adjustments feel like you can make them do whatever you want. And, importantly, they say this whole approach is a big break from centuries of traditional Islamic scholarship.
So in the end, we're left with this really fascinating tension. Is this a profound discovery, or is it a really powerful example of human psychology at work?
On the one hand, you have this really compelling web of numbers and connections that feels like it has to mean something, right? But on the other hand, the very methods used to create that web are what's in question. It raises huge questions about confirmation bias, finding the patterns you were looking for in the first place. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. Are we looking at a miraculous divine code, a fingerprint from God hidden in plain sight? Or are we looking at something that might be just as profound, a perfect example of the human mind's incredible, maybe even unstoppable ability to find patterns and create meaning in anything and everything? What do you think? The answer, well, that's for you to decide.